Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to the stars of theatre, and the most talked about musical, I think, in West End history is opening next week, and I thought we'd speak to the number one reviewer in Britain, the most respected. Mark Shenton is the man who knows it all, and I'm delighted to say he joins us now from Broadway. How are you?
Good. Hi, Alex. I'm in New York as we speak, catching the newest shows. Hamilton, of course, has been here for a number of years now, and is now pretty much old news, but still going very strong.
I'm not wrong in saying there hasn't been this amount of hype with this higher price ticket before it's even opened of any other musical in history in the West End, is there?
It's pretty extraordinary. This show has had such a head of steam on it ever since it opened at the Public Theatre downtown, and it's just been unstoppable. It takes more money than any other show on Broadway every week, over $3 million a week most weeks, and that's of course generated by the fact that they sell so many premium pricing tickets, which are there's a set top price, and then there's a flexible price beyond that. That if the demand is there for it, people pay anything to go and see it.
I've given up. I've been to Broadway 5 times since it's been on. There has never been a ticket available that I could afford. It's the same in the West End. Is that okay? I mean, it's supply and demand. People want to see it, therefore they'll charge what they like. Is it okay that they're starting at about 200 and going up into the thousands to see it, certainly this year in the West End?
Yes. Well, of course, you have to separate what's the official price at the box office and the secondary ticket market. The producers have no control over the secondary ticket market, although Cameron Mackintosh is making very strenuous efforts. People are going to have to show ID at the theatre to collect their tickets, so they can't sell on their tickets. But you're absolutely right. This is a supply and demand market. People are charging what the market will bear. But on the other hand, I do think it's a dangerous precedent because it sends out a signal to the general public that theatre is unaffordable. And of course, it's not true. This show may be unaffordable because it's so in demand, but actually, by and large, you can get into a lot of shows in the West End for 20 quid. So it's crazy to talk about, to focus on the £200 or and above tickets when there are so many other shows you can see at less. But of course, this is the show everybody wants to see because it's what everybody's talking about. Okay,
everybody's talking about Jamie at the moment. We like that. I haven't seen Hamilton. Is it worth the hype?
Do you know, it's funny because I saw, of course, everybody talking about Jamie again just last week, and I suddenly thought to myself that Hamilton actually has a real run for its money on here, because Jamie is so brilliant and so authentically British that Hamilton is a totally different show, but actually they'll obviously both be in contention with each other for the awards come next year, and they're both groundbreaking in a very different way. So there are similarities in the fact that they both advance the form of musical theatre. Hamilton, of course, is a very specifically American subject. It's a man one of the founding fathers of the American nation, and it's a distant history that we don't really know in Britain. But I don't think that actually matters. I think the show is so vibrant and alive that it will transcend the fact that we don't actually really know the facts of what it's about. The fact is everybody's heard of this musical now. Even if they didn't know who Hamilton was before that, they certainly know now. He is the figure on the $10 bill. He's probably his most famous fact in America. But it's such an extraordinary show. The score is one of the most vibrant and alive modern musicals I've ever heard. Once upon a time, musicals were the pop music of their day. Now, this is a musical that for the first time in decades is actually is the sort of music that could be heard on the charts.
About 10, 15 years ago, I was there on Broadway and interviewed a young man called Lin-Manuel Miranda. He'd got this hit called In the Heights. It's hard to believe from that little show he'd go on to be a global megastar and the hottest ticket in town. I mean, this man can't do wrong at the moment, can he?
Absolutely. I mean, In the Heights, it's very interesting because In the Heights was running in London when Hamilton first opened on Broadway, and seeing them back to back, as I saw then, you could see how Hamilton led on from In the Heights. You could see the influences, although In the Heights is a totally different show and very conventional in its structure. But the musical ingenuity and and the musical invention is there. So he is a phenomenal talent. I mean, what's going to be interesting to see is what comes next. I mean, what's he going to write next? That's what everybody's waiting for, because Hamilton is now 4 years old, so we need his next show.
That pressure, though, is unbearable, isn't it? How can you top this huge hype? I've never known anything like it.
No, it is. It has been extraordinary, and what's the most extraordinary thing about it, frankly, I think, is that it's fully deserved. Often shows get overhyped. I don't think it's possible to overhype it. So I recently interviewed the man who runs the Public Theatre where the show originated, Oscar Eustace, and he said that he told me that when it was in performance at the Public, he would try to overstate it to people. He would try to say to people, this is the greatest musical ever written, and see what their reactions would be. And he said they would come out of the show and say, it's actually better than you said it was. So,
wow.
So I don't think it's possible to actually overstate how brilliant it is.
And in terms of the music, I mean, there's no flying witch or giraffes in this. What are we getting? Are we getting comedy songs? We know we're getting sort of pop rap. We know that's sort of his shtick,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes.
What do we get as a show? Is it funny?
There's not too much humour. No, I mean it's quite earnest, very powerful, because the way it moves in such an ecstatic way. The choreography and the music integrate so seamlessly, and you just feel yourself swept along by it. It's difficult to describe because it's a show that you just feel it to your core. I think it's sensational, truly.
Just a few final questions about the West End at the moment. If you had £100 to see any show, I know you probably couldn't get into Hamilton, what would be your top three at the moment if we were going into the West End?
Well, I think Follies at the National is unmissable. I've seen that 4 times so far, and I'm going a 5th. It's the revival of the Stephen Sondheim musical from the 70s, and it has an amazing cast at the National. You can't get a ticket for love or money, but it has Imelda Staunton, Janie Dee, Philip Cost, and it's just wonderful. I also really, really rate Everybody's Talking About Jamie. You probably won't need to spend £200 to get into that, because you can get tickets to see it. And a show that I really, really loved and surprised myself loving was Young Frankenstein at the Garrick.
Me too.
This is the Mel Brooks musical that is a sequel to the producers. Mel wrote it himself, wrote the score himself, and when it opened on Broadway, it wasn't very good. And suddenly in London, it's brilliant. It's really funny, really, really beautifully performed. I really recommend that for a good laugh.
Yeah, I was disappointed. Some of the press were picking up on the fact that it's misogynistic and all of this stuff. Look, leave your brain at the door. It's Mel Brooks. It's hysterical. That thing with a horse in the opening 20 minutes is one of the most funny things I've ever seen in a theatre.
Yeah. It's great. It's really great, and beautifully performed. I mean, great cast. It's just a riot. Just a lot of fun.
Seems like it's been a great year for theatre. We had things like Working at Southwark, which was just tremendous. There's a lot on the road at the moment. For you, has it been a great year?
Yeah, absolutely. There's all we were really blessed in London. There's so much great theatre on. I've also loved American in Paris this year. I thought that was wonderful. It didn't work at the box office, but it was really beautiful. That was a stunning import from Broadway again. So we've had some really, really good shows.
And we move forward to 2018. I suppose it's going to be all about Hamilton.
Yes, although there are already other new shows announced for next year. So the truth is that the West End is never about just one show. On Broadway, it is often like that. Broadway coalesces around one show in particular, and then right now, obviously there's Hamilton from the previous season, but this year's show has been Dear Evan Hansen that everyone talks about, and Come From Away as well has also been a big success here. But there usually isn't room for more than 2 or 3 shows at a time in New York. On Broadway, in the West End, we can choose from a very wide palette, and that's really good because it means there's always something for everybody. What was your gem of the year? Did you love Bette in Hello Dolly? What was your highlight? Yeah, Bette Midler was fantastic in Hello Dolly over here. I did like that very much. It was not my absolute highlight. I was really surprised by Come From Away, actually. It's a sort of folk musical that is just beautifully done about the planes that were diverted to Newfoundland on 9/11. And it creates this really beautiful folk musical out of a true story. But the show for me that is the highlight of the year, and a show I saw 9 times in all, 6 times on Broadway, was Groundhog Day, that came from the Old Vic, and I think is just a masterpiece. released. Unfortunately, it didn't catch on, and it's no longer running on Broadway, but it's actually one of my favourite shows of not just of this year, but of any year. I think it's in my top 10 musicals of all time.
Such a shame, and you could never guess. I mean, we both sat there on preview week. Again, who would have thought that didn't quite work? I think they screwed up the Tonys. They put in the wrong song. It was very unspectacular and not really grabbing an audience.
Obviously, a good showing at the Tonys would have helped, but it's not about one song. The fact is that Broadway can only sustain one or maybe two shows at a time, or new shows at a time, because it's very expensive to see a show on Broadway. It's now upwards of you mentioned £200 for Hamilton in the West End. Broadway, $200 and counting, and tickets go up to, right now Bruce Springsteen's on Broadway. The tickets are $800 a piece. So it's expensive to go see a Broadway show. People can't see them all, so they have to make choices.
And the choice that many children will be making on Broadway next year and the year after that in the West End may be Frozen. Is it again worth the hype? Did they do the business?
Absolutely. I actually went out to Denver for the opening night in the summer, and it was amazing. It's directed by a Brit, Michael Brandage, and designed by his partner, Christopher Oram. It's spectacular. It delivers on everything that you want Frozen to deliver on. I'm not its target audience, but I loved it. So and all the little girls dressed up in their princess outfits were adoring it. So that's going to be a smash.
It's almost too big to get wrong, isn't it? They had to get that right.
Yeah.
Congratulations on everything. Thank you so much for your time today. Mark Shenton is the man when it comes to reviews in the UK, and we thank you for your time. If they want to reach you on Twitter, @Shenton Stage is the place to find Mark Shenton, the top reviewer in the UK. Thank you for your time, and Merry Christmas.
And you too. Bye.